Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading cosmic horror related stories every single day. So if that sounds good, please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. Humans have been broadcasting radio signals for over a century. We never really thought about where those signals were going. We just sent them out into the world, into the air, into space, without ever considering that someone might be listening. But something was. Something heard our very first transmissions, back when radio was still a novelty and the world was just learning to speak in waves that traveled at the speed of light. And it's been answering ever since, sending signals back to us, trying to make contact. We just didn't know how to listen. I know how to listen now. I wish I didn't. I wish I'd never tuned into that frequency, never heard what was hiding in the static, never opened the door that can't be closed. My name is Virgil Combs, and I work as a broadcast engineer at WKLN, a small AM radio station in a town called Sutter's Gap. It's one of those places that time forgot, tucked away in rural Appalachia, population around 3,000 and shrinking every year. The station is about as old as the town itself, operating out of a brick building on the edge of the main road with a transmission tower out back that's been standing since 1919. I took this job 5 years ago after bouncing around various technical positions that never quite worked out. I'm not formally educated in any of this. Everything I know, I learned by doing, by taking things apart and putting them back together, by listening to the hum of machines and understanding what they're trying to tell me. I've always been more comfortable with equipment than with people. Machines make sense. They follow rules. When something's wrong, you can find the problem and fix it. I used to believe that anyway. WKLN is a struggling station, has been for years. We broadcast a mix of old music, local news, and syndicated talk shows to an audience that gets smaller every year. Most people listen to streaming services now, or satellite radio, or podcasts. AM radio is a dying medium, and stations like ours are just waiting for the end. The owner is a man named Lionel Teague. He's in his 80s, been running WKLN for over 50 years, and he refuses to let it go. Refuses to modernize too. Most of our equipment dates back decades. Some of it is even older than that. Original pieces from when the station first went on the air. Lionel says the old equipment is special. Says it can do things that modern equipment can't. I always thought that was just an old man being sentimental about the past. I understand now what he meant. I first heard it on a Tuesday night in February. I was alone at the station, running maintenance on the transmission equipment, while the overnight programming played automatically. It was around 2 a.m, that dead hour when the world feels empty, and the silence between songs seems to stretch on forever. I was adjusting one of the old receivers, a piece of equipment from the 1940s that Lionel insisted we keep operational, when I picked up something strange. A signal, buried deep in the static, on a frequency our equipment shouldn't have been able to receive. It wasn't music, it wasn't voices, it wasn't anything I could identify. It was a pattern of tones, rising and falling in sequences that felt deliberate, not random noise, not interference from other stations, something structured, something intentional. I tried to tune it in more clearly, but it faded as quickly as it had appeared, just slipped away into the static, like it had never been there. I sat in the quiet for a long time after that, listening to the empty hiss of dead air, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The next night, I mentioned it to Daphne Kellogg. She works the overnight shift as a DJ, midnight to 6 in the morning, playing requests and keeping the lonely listeners company. She's been at WKLN for 3 years, and in that time, I don't think I've ever seen her rattled by anything. But when I described what I'd heard, her face went pale. "You heard it too," she said quietly. I was hoping I was the only one. Daphne told me she'd been hearing things in the dead hours for years, sounds that came through the monitors even when nothing was being broadcast, patterns in the static that seemed almost like language, if language could exist without words, tones that repeated and evolved, like something trying very hard to be understood. She'd stopped talking about it because everyone thought she was crazy. Even she had started to think she was crazy. But I'd heard it too, which meant either we were both losing our minds or something was really there. I started researching the station's history after that conversation. WKLN's transmission tower was built in 1919, making it one of the oldest continuously operating radio towers in the country. The original owner was a man named Harold Sutter, the founder of Sutter's Gap. He'd made his money in coal, but his passion was radio technology. He believed it was the future of human communication. He also believed it could be used to contact intelligences beyond Earth. The records I found were scattered and incomplete, but the picture they painted was clear. Harold Sutter was obsessed with the idea that radio waves could reach other worlds, that if humanity broadcast its voice into the cosmos, something might hear it and respond. He built his tower to specifications that were unusual even for the time. Frequencies that other equipment couldn't reach. Receivers sensitive enough to pick up signals that should have been impossible to detect. He wasn't just building a radio station. He was building a listening post. And based on what I found in his notes, he started hearing things almost immediately. I confronted Lionel about it the following week. The old man was quiet for a long time when I told him what I'd discovered. He stared out the window of his office at the transmission tower, that tall metal structure that had been standing for over 100 years, and his hands trembled slightly against his desk. "Come back tonight," he finally said. "After the station closes. There's something you need to hear." I came back at 1 in the morning. Lionel was waiting for me in his office, surrounded by boxes I'd never seen before. Old boxes covered in dust, filled with things that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. "Every owner of this station has kept records," he said, pulling out items one by one. Wax cylinders, magnetic tapes, cassettes, CDs. Going all the way back to Harold Sutter, we've been documenting what comes through that tower for almost 100 years. He played some of the recordings for me. The oldest ones were scratchy, barely audible, but I could hear it. That same pattern of tones I'd picked up on Tuesday night, rising and falling, repeating and evolving, hidden in the static, like a whisper you could almost understand. The newer recordings were clearer, the patterns more complex, more structured. They've been getting more sophisticated, Lionel said, over the decades, like they're learning, adapting, figuring out how to communicate with us. Who? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. We've been broadcasting into space for over a century, Lionel said. Radio waves travel at the speed of light. They spread out into the universe like ripples in a pond. Every song we've ever played, every word we've ever spoken into a microphone, it's all out there, traveling forever. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Something heard us, Virgil. Way out there in the dark, it heard our very first signals, and it started answering, trying to make contact, trying to be heard. And the tower picks it up. Lionel nodded. Harold Sutter built it to receive frequencies that other equipment can't. He didn't know what he was building. He just wanted to listen to the stars, but he heard them, and they heard him. I spent the next week obsessed with the signals. I stayed at the station every night, using the old equipment to scan frequencies that modern radios couldn't reach. Slowly, I learned to tune in the transmissions more clearly, to separate them from the background noise of the universe. They weren't random. They had structure, repetition, sequences that built on each other, evolved, responded to changes, call and response, question and answer. It was communication, alien and incomprehensible, but definitely communication. Something out there was trying very hard to talk to us. One night, around 2 a.m, I decided to do something that no one at the station had done in a very long time. I sent a signal back. I used the old transmission equipment to broadcast a simple pattern, a sequence of tones that mirrored what I'd been receiving. Nothing complicated, just an acknowledgement, a way of saying, I hear you, I'm listening. For hours, nothing happened. I sat alone in the transmission room, surrounded by humming equipment and the soft hiss of static, wondering if I'd made a mistake, wondering if anyone was really out there at all. Then around 3 a.m, the response came. Stronger than anything I'd ever heard, clearer. The pattern I'd sent echoed back at me with additions, elaborations, new sequences building on the old ones. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't equipment malfunction. Something had heard my transmission and responded. Something was excited that someone had finally answered. I felt it in the signal. That excitement, that relief, like someone who had been calling out for years and years and finally heard a voice call back. After that night, everything changed. The signals got stronger. They started appearing on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to carry them. I heard them at home, on my regular radio, buried under the music and talk shows. I heard them in the buzz of fluorescent lights, in the hum of power lines, in the soft crackle of my old television. Whatever was sending those signals knew I was listening now, and it was trying very hard to be heard. I told Lionel what I'd done, what I'd sent, what had come back. I've never seen a man's face go so grey so fast. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength for someone so old. His fingers dug into my flesh, hard enough to bruise. You answered them, he said. You sent a signal back. I said yes. I thought I was making first contact. I thought I was doing something historic. Harold Sutter did that too, Lionel said. In 1923, 2 weeks later, half this town went mad. He told me the story. People hearing voices that weren't there, seeing things in the shadows that nobody else could see. 12 townspeople walked into the woods in the middle of the night and never came back. They searched for weeks. No bodies, no trace, like they'd simply stepped out of existence. Every time someone tries to communicate with the signals, something bad follows, Lionel said. Every single time. The signals aren't just communication, Virgil. They're a connection, a door opening. And once that door opens, things start coming through. I wanted to believe he was exaggerating. An old man, superstitious, scared of things he didn't understand. But I could already feel something changing, in the air around me, in the silence between sounds, in my own head, where thoughts that didn't feel like mine were starting to whisper. Strange things began happening in Sutter's Gap over the following days. People complained of hearing sounds at night, tones and patterns like music from a radio station that didn't exist, whispers that seemed to come from empty rooms, from walls, from the air itself. Electronics started malfunctioning all over town, radios turning on by themselves in the middle of the night, televisions displaying static that moved in patterns, organized and deliberate, like something trying to form an image. Cell phones picking up audio that wasn't calls, wasn't voicemail, wasn't anything that should have been possible. Several people reported headaches, nosebleeds, the feeling of being watched by something they couldn't see. An elderly woman named Edith Corrigan was found wandering the streets at 4 a.m. She was speaking in sounds that didn't form words, tones and clicks and rhythms that rose and fell like the signals I'd been hearing. When the police brought her home, she couldn't remember her own name. She just kept making those sounds over and over, like a radio tuned to a station from somewhere very far away. The signals were spreading, leaking out of the station, out of the frequencies where they'd been contained, into everything. I could hear them constantly now. In the wind outside my window, in the water running through my pipes, in the silence between my own heartbeats. They were everywhere, growing louder, growing more complex, growing more urgent. They weren't just trying to communicate anymore. They were trying to teach. I went to check on Daphne when she stopped coming to work. I found her in her apartment, huddled in the corner of her bedroom with all the lights off. The curtains were drawn. The air was stale and heavy. She'd been there for days, from the look of things. She was rocking back and forth, her hands pressed over her ears, but it wasn't helping. You can't block out sounds that come from inside your own head. They won't stop, she whispered when she saw me. I can hear them all the time now. Every second, they're so loud, they want me to understand. I knelt down beside her. Her eyes were wrong, pupils dilated too wide, like she was looking at something bright that I couldn't see. What do they want? They want us to know, she said. They've been trying to tell us for so long, ever since they first heard our voices. They were so alone out there, Virgil, so alone for so long. And then they heard us, and they realized they weren't alone anymore. And they've been trying to reach us ever since. Her voice shifted, became dreamy, almost peaceful. They're so happy we finally answered, so excited to show us everything, all the things they know, all the things they've seen. They want to share it all with us. Daphne, we need to get you help. We need to... They're coming, she interrupted, her eyes focused on mine with terrible clarity. Now that the door is open, they're coming. They've been traveling toward us for a long time. Some of them have been traveling since before we existed, and they're bringing everything with them. She smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. We're going to understand so much, Virgil. We're going to see so much. It's going to be beautiful and terrifying, and we're never going to be alone again. I left her there. I didn't know what else to do. I called emergency services, but when they arrived, she was gone. The apartment was empty. The back door was open, leading out into the woods behind her building. They searched for 3 days. They never found her. I finally understand what's happening. The signals were never just communication. They were preparation. Something out there heard our first radio broadcast over a century ago. Our voices, our music, our static and noise spreading out into the universe at the speed of light. A small planet suddenly becoming loud after billions of years of silence, and it started reaching back, sending signals of its own, trying to make contact. But communication was only the first step. Every signal it sends carries something more than sound, information, knowledge, something that gets inside your head and starts to change you, starts to prepare you. Every person who hears the signals clearly is being rewritten. Ideas planted in the cracks of their consciousness, new ways of thinking growing like seeds in fertile soil. I can feel it happening to me. Thoughts that aren't mine, surfacing from somewhere deep. Concepts I don't have words for, expanding in the back of my mind. An understanding of things that human brains were never meant to comprehend. They're getting us ready for something, for when they arrive. Lionel died 3 days ago. Heart failure. I found him in his office, slumped over the old recordings he'd spent his life collecting. His face was peaceful, but his hands were still clutching a note he'd written. Instructions for destroying the tower, for smashing the old equipment, for closing the door before anything else could come through. I know I should do it. I know it might be the only way to stop what's coming. But every time I try to walk toward the tower, my body refuses. My legs won't carry me. My hands won't obey. It's like trying to move through concrete that only I can feel. They're inside me now. Whatever's hiding in those signals, it's part of me, and it doesn't want the connection broken. It's been waiting too long, traveling too far. It's not going to let one frightened man with a sledgehammer ruin everything. So I'm doing the only thing I can still do. WKLN is still broadcasting. The transmitter is still running, sending our signal out into the night, out into the world, out into space, where it will travel forever. I sat down at the microphone an hour ago. First time I've ever done that. I'm an engineer, not a DJ. I work with machines, not voices. But I'm using my voice now. I'm telling you what I know, what's coming, what's already here. I'm broadcasting this warning on every frequency the station can reach. AM and FM and frequencies that aren't supposed to exist. The old equipment can do things that modern equipment can't. Lionel was right about that. I want someone to hear this. I want someone to understand. We thought we were alone in the universe. We thought our radio signals were just disappearing into the void, unheard, unnoticed, echoing forever into nothing. We were wrong. They heard us. They've been listening since the very first transmission, and they've been trying to talk to us ever since, whispering in the static, hiding between the stations, waiting for someone to tune in. I tuned in. I answered. And now the door is open and it can't be closed. I can feel them listening right now. Not just the people out there in the dark, the insomniacs and the night owls and the lonely souls who keep their radios on for company. The other listeners, the ones who have been waiting for over a century. They're pleased. I can feel their pleasure like electricity in my blood, like static crawling across my skin. Because every radio signal travels outward forever. Every broadcast extends the reach. Every transmission opens the door a little wider. I'm warning you, but I'm also spreading them. My voice is carrying them out into the world, into homes, into cars, into earbuds and speakers and headphones everywhere. They're going to follow my voice back. They're going to follow every voice back. They've been traveling toward us for a very long time. Some of them were already on their way before we even existed, heading toward a planet that would eventually become loud enough to notice. Some of them are already here. Listen to the static tonight. Turn your radio to an empty frequency and just listen. You might hear them whispering, patterns in the noise, tones that rise and fall like breathing, a language that's almost words but not quite. If you hear them, it's already too late. But you should know what's coming. You deserve to understand. We sent our voices into the dark, and the dark answered. Now it's coming to meet us, and it's bringing everything with it. This transcript was recovered from an automated recording system at radio station WKLN in Sutter's Gap. The station went off the air approximately 3 hours after the broadcast was made. When authorities arrived, the building was empty. No sign of the broadcaster or any other staff member. The transmission equipment was still running. It is still running, as of the writing of this report. Every attempt to shut it down has failed. The signal it broadcasts now is not the one described in this transcript. It is something else. Patterns of tones that rise and fall, sounds that are almost words. FCC officials have recommended avoiding the frequency. The recommendation has been largely ignored. Listeners across the country have reported tuning in, curious about the strange sounds. Reports of unusual behavior have increased significantly in the past week. Headaches, nosebleeds, sleepwalking, people speaking in sounds that are not words. In the town of Sutter's Gap, the population has decreased by approximately 40%. Most residents have simply left. Some have wandered into the woods and not returned. The transmission tower, built in 1919, still stands. It broadcasts continuously, day and night, without anyone operating it. Listen to the static. They want you to hear them. They've been waiting so long to be heard.